Hi, this is Evelyn Lopez. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear, the Earth911.com podcast for the week of April 29th, 2019. We are recording at the very lovely Gardenside Springfield Moon Yard Recording Studio in Tacoma, Washington. Really is lovely here, guys.
Huzzah.
It's beautiful. Spring is here, even up in our northern corners of the country, and gardeners are assessing their plots and making plans. So we thought today we would take some time to talk about spring garden essentials, especially things like soil prep, building and solarizing, readying your soil, and also how to encourage kids and maybe some of you beginning or wannabe gardeners out there. So, welcome everyone. Mitch Radcliffe, our Earth911 publisher. Mitch, where are you calling in from today?
Well, I'm doing my home office in Lakewood, Washington.
Excellent.
Always nice to look out the backyard and see the garden growing.
Absolutely. And I believe you have dogs assisting you today?
I have two dogs assisting me today. We have a new member of the family, Miriam, who joined yesterday. She's a lovely standard poodle.
Lovely. Wonderful. And our Earth911 writer, Sarah Lozanova. Sarah, where are you today?
I am in rainy Mid-Coast, Maine.
Ooh, but you must be experiencing a nice rainy thaw then.
Yeah, pretty much all the snow and ice is gone.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I know you have a lot of things to share about soil prep and getting ready for gardening, so we'll be talking about that. But first, I wanted to follow up on some of the things happening at Earth911. One of the things I noticed on our website is we had the first annual Earth911 Sustainability Awards. Mitch, what was this?
Well, we asked Trey Granger, who has been on the show many times, to look over a variety of areas of recycling activity and pick out some of the best. And so he looked at community recycling education programs for small and large cities. Louisville, Kentucky, we singled out as the best consumer education program. They've increased their business recycling rate from 11 to 80% over the course of just a year.
Wow, that's pretty stunning.
Definitely deserves some recognition. New Orleans, which has been working to both clean up from Hurricane Katrina even now, as well as reduce the impact of Mardi Gras plastic beads, is our runner-up in that category. And up in Maine, Portland, Maine, got the best small city that is less than 250,000 person consumer education. And they've introduced a pay-as-you-throw trash bag program, and for a lot of non-recyclable products. And the result is the city now has the lowest average number of pounds of trash per capita in the 20 cities within the district, the regional district that it participates in. So they're making a lot of progress.
Wow, that's really good.
We also went and looked at, this is one we covered last summer, Best Green Nonprofit. And we really like what Souls for Souls is doing. It's a Nashville-based charity that has donated over 35 million pairs of shoes. A lot of these are buy and give one free, but they're also reuse programs. And so these this has been deployed in 127 countries since 2006. So we wanted to honor them. Another area was we looked at the best circular economy innovation. That is a product that is coming and going from the recycled world. So if you buy it, it's made with recycled material. And if you're going to get rid of it at the end of life, it can be recycled. Our number one product was Vita, V-I-T-A. It's a 100% ocean-bound bottle. So what it does is these are personal care products made in or delivered in packaging that is 100% based on ocean plastics, resin that's collected from the ocean and then reused to make the packaging. And then the other packaging innovation that we liked was Corona, the beer company's plastic-free six-pack rings, which they introduced this year.
Nice.
It's the first major brewery company to really fully embrace the idea of biodegradable six-pack rings. And last but not least, the most power-efficient product that we recognized was the Casa Smart Wi-Fi Power Strip. So it's a it's a surge protector, but it also has the ability to understand when things are being used that are plugged into it, and can monitor the energy use of each device and control it, as well as allow you to control it through wireless commands. So you can literally speak to your you can speak to your plugs now.
Wow. I wonder what the plugs might say back. This is a great list. So if you're interested in this, it's on our website right now, and there's also a link to the individual products. And that is super, because not only can you feel good about using these products, but you can support these companies, which is, I think, very encouraging as well.
Yeah, and we really want to encourage people to make those kinds of commitments to find out about the products that they use and support the companies that do the best job. And speaking of that, we wrote a piece about the recycled and recyclable solar-powered water bottle that will allow you to track your drinking. It's called the Hydrate bottle. It's been on Kickstarter and is just finishing up its campaign, which was fully funded. So.
Wow.
They are actually going to be shipping these really cool water bottles that measure how much you drink and contribute an ounce of water to charity water for every ounce you drink.
Wow.
So that's just a great project, and I was so happy to see them get their funding.
That's really good. Well, I also wanted to ask you, Mitch, about the ISRI 2019 conference highlights. I know that Earth911 was really involved in that conference this year.
Yeah, we sponsored the Residential Recycling Summit, which is a new area of exploration for ISRI, which is a very old organization, many decades old. But they are trying to understand and help encourage a dialogue around how to increase recycling rates at curbside and also reduce the proliferation of plastic and other kinds of packaging-related pollution around the world in the oceans and beaches, as well as in cities and towns. And it was a really interesting 2 days of conversation. We talked about safety in the materials recovery facilities. We talked about ocean plastic, paper, particularly the massive amount of cardboard that's being used in the United States. Although I learned that we are nowhere near our actual peak corrugated paper usage.
Really?
Which had declined from 1990 to 2007 and only started to grow again when Amazon began home deliveries at scale. And the interesting thing is that these boxes are, let's just call it paper gold. And they're trying to figure out ways to help people start to capture and collect that and bring it back. But it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars in recovered material. So there's a lot of interest in that.
And is that because it mulches down into a really good pulp that can be reused for other things, or is there something else?
It's the longest fiber you get back from a recycled form of paper.
Okay.
So it's at the beginning of its usable life, essentially. And then you could use it in paper by bleaching it. You could use it again in some kind of packaging or in a composite like the biodegradable six-pack rings. Mm-hmm. So it's got a lot of potential use. And this is funny, I'm breaking the story here. The old poodle will not sit behind me where the new poodle just sat. It's in her customary place. She's lying on my desk.
Okay. I guess they've got their spaces set out.
They do. They've already set up their new spaces.
Perfect.
So now back to the show.
The show.
The other thing that was great about the show was I attended a session about women in recycling and met 5 leading recycling executives who are women. And they ranged from Becky Proler, who is the granddaughter of the guy who invented the shredding machine that made recycling of metal at scale possible and basically invented the industry. Wow. And she had been, in the 1980s, thinking she could not work in her family company because she was a woman. She started her own company and has grown that over the past 30 years into one of the largest recyclers in the Houston area. And she brings so much fascinating background from counseling psychology, her perspective on the recycling industry, the way it used to be and where it's going. Brandy Harlow, who is a younger woman who came out of investment banking and working at Disney to go back to her family's Houston-based recycling company as well, South Post Oak Recycling Center, was really great because she said, she's a woman of color as well. She said, if I can't get through the front door, I'm going to come in the back door and come out through the front. And she's trying to build up mentoring programs within the industry, within her own company. Mickey Cofino, who is a former hair salon owner who turned scrapyard entrepreneur in 2013, has grown a nice-sized business and is doing great work incenting her people to the point where she has the lowest attrition rate in the industry, just 1%. So the diversity of ideas and approaches that women bring to this industry are much needed, and it was really great to see this coming together. ISRI has formalized their support of female executives with a new women's council. And I also met the first female president or chairman, of the British Recycling Association, who won her seat after 100 years of male leadership. So it's good to see that going on.
That's really good. Very inspiring.
And we've got a story on the site about that. So
yeah, excellent. So check that out on our website right now. Well, let's talk about gardening. And let's start with what I think of as the most essential, and that's the soil. And I should say, this is one that I think about a lot because I live in the part of Tacoma that had years and years and years of pollution from the Asarco aluminum copper plant. And so we've been told, don't plant vegetables just in the ground, use a raised bed. Don't, forget to wash your hands very thoroughly after you come in for gardening. Preferably leave your shoes outside, although we don't do that so much. So it's the soil is very important.
Yeah, and that the smelter story is something that is hard to believe if you haven't been here. There was a dead zone. A lot of the Superfund spending over the last 30 years has eliminated a lot of that completely polluted soil, but you've still got an area there, like you said, that heavy metals are everywhere, and we have a real problem. But I can remember when I was a kid tasting the sulfur in the air.
Yeah.
And it's gone for a long time, and that's been a real relief.
Yeah, it really has been. Well, Sarah, why don't you start out by talking about, ideas and suggestions for getting ready to plant or taking it from the first turn of the soil forward?
Yeah. I would suggest to get started, just to get to know your soil, especially if people are beginning gardeners and just getting started. So to notice, like, for example, now is a really good time to notice how the water drains in your yard. Are there areas where the water pools, because then you get a better sense of the type of plants that you'll want to plant where. Also knowing just how much sun you get and really building up the soils in a positive way. So if you have clay or sandy soils or pretty much any soil type, adding organic matter is really helpful. Like I went to a local cemetery and got a bunch of leaf mulch and applied that to most of my garden beds this year just to try to get some organic matter. It really helps too.
And Sarah, when you do that, let's say you have sort of sandy soil or clay soil and you want to amend it a little bit with mulch or something, is just putting the mulch on top of it enough, or do you have to work it in somehow?
It depends how well broken down it is. So the leaves that I got, I think had been breaking down for a couple of years. Like it basically looked like dirt. Mm-hmm. So at that point, it's great just to mix in. I think I could actually even plant a garden bed directly out of this leaf material. If it's less broken down, then it's often advisable to keep it more on the surface. And it can be really helpful for keeping weeds out and kind of helping to lock in the moisture too.
When you're getting to know your soil, should you do a pH test? Is that something that's essential to understanding? A lot of people say know your soil's pH. Is that real?
Yeah, that can be really helpful, especially if you live in certain areas where the soils tend to be outside of the ideal range. So that's something that I'm doing this year. There's kits that you can get, like home kits for pH. I'm gonna mail a couple soil samples away, and that will help me find out the NPK, the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus levels, and other things like calcium, magnesium, sulfur. It would even let me know if lead contamination is an issue.
So now this is a beginning gardener question. I've been gardening for a long time, but what I was early on flummoxed by were the numbers on fertilizer, and so the NHK level is what you're talking about, being able to balance with those numbers. Once you have your soil pH and you've got a sense of whether there's lead and the like, what's your next step? What do you tend to do?
Well, there's different ways that you can amend your soil, like different nutrients that you can add. And it's important to not overdo it, because actually too much nutrients isn't a good thing either. Partially because it can contribute, it can run off of your garden and pollute waterways. But so then you can add, I have like these powdered fertilizers that I add, and I tend to just kind of, you can put them in with the plants if your planting starts, or you can mix it into the bed directly. And one of the ideas is just to, each year as much as possible, add nutrients to the garden. Like in the fall, you can add some leaf mulch on top, or, possibly some seaweed or things like that, but adding locally available, ideally locally, produced and harvested materials, just to kind of keep the nutrients up. But yeah, then you can also add these fertilizers to get the NPK balance where you want it. And that also depends on what you're growing. Like nitrogen is really good for leaf growth. And then
or beans.
Yeah. And potassium is good for fruits and flowers. Or phosphorus is good for fruits and flowers.
Are you a raised bed person, or do you plant in the ground?
I've done both. And there's advantages to both. I don't tend to like right angles, which makes me prefer a different aesthetic, but I do have raised beds, and they're really easy in a lot of ways. Both of my kids have raised beds that are 4x4, and it's nice because it's just so tangible. You can just see exactly what you have to work with. Right. And people aren't trampling on the soil. Mm-hmm. So they can work really well.
We have a nice guide on the site to building your own greenhouses and raised beds. So 7 DIY greenhouse ideas. And there's one here that both Evelyn and I are intrigued by, and that's the idea of building a plastic bottle greenhouse. We even have links to instructions from Washington College. But, you can actually make a greenhouse out of virtually anything and combine them with raised beds so that with a cold frame over the top, or laying sort of across the bed in order to keep it warm earlier in the year, and then remove that so that they're getting full light and air during the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. Good resource for people to check out.
Yeah, I think that the plastic bottle one was particularly interesting just because, you always want to think if there's any way you can reuse some of the plastics in your life. And the pictures, if you follow the link to the explanatory article, it's actually quite attractive. And I think there's different ways you can make it. I don't know that I need a full greenhouse. I have a tragic home greenhouse story, but I won't share it now because it's very, very heartrending and sad. But needless to say, I will give you the short version. It tested every ounce of my marriage to build a greenhouse with my husband over the summer. And then in December, a historic windstorm came through and knocked it all down in 15 minutes. And we've never, ever rebuilt. But the place where the greenhouse was is a really great place for me to do straw bale gardening, which is what I do for growing tomatoes and things.
Variation on a raised bed.
Yeah.
We also, the other one I liked in the article was using recycled windows to create a greenhouse, which I thought was an interesting idea for using construction waste.
Yeah, I think that actually can make a really attractive display too, because you can use some weathered wood and some old windows and make it really a feature.
And windows are so hard to recycle too. And especially if they're kind of leaky and inefficient, it's hard to find a positive use for them. So this seems like a great great way to put them back into use.
So what are you guys planting for pest prevention and so that we can stay away from using the chemicals? I have particularly invested in pennyroyal this year and lavender, but which both help to repel certain types of bugs, particularly mosquitoes and flies and fleas, which with new dogs we have to worry about.
You know, I didn't know about that at all. I've always had herbs around my house because I like to use them in cooking. And I grow some lavender just because I like to have it for lavender scent and for bees. I didn't realize that the herbs could actually keep pests away until I read the article on our website. We've got one up there about 9 pest prevention plants. So does it actually work if you grow lavender and things like that? Will you actually have fewer annoying bugs in your yard?
Well, I'm in the midst of an experiment, but and so I don't know yet, but that is what I am aiming at this year. So I will report back. Purportedly, because lavender, you know, if you've ever been near a lavender farm, you can smell it from a mile away. Those chemicals do fill the air, and that should keep the mosquitoes away. In particular, we live off a lake, so that would be a
big deal then. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard marigolds are good too. I find it hard to determine because you don't really know how bad the bugs would have been without them. I know for pest control, just having really healthy soil is supposed to be a good thing as well.
Yeah.
And then I think there's other things you can do for specific ailments, like not watering. Like I think watering techniques can be really helpful to prevent different types of blights. You know, like if the leaves are wet in the sun, that can be harmful to certain plants. But so much of that depends on where you live. You know, the different pests and blights and things that we need to look out for vary so much.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why, you know, native plants, which is what my Earth Day project this year was to native plant my yard. And that involved finding the right kind of milkweed, for instance, for the Northwest in order to support butterflies. We have been focusing on native plants to reduce our watering as well. Now, up here, native plants are primarily rhododendrons and things like that that fill up large spaces. I have not figured out ground cover in the Northwest yet. And that, if anybody has ideas out there, please send us some suggestions because we would love to figure that out.
Yeah, you know, I don't have a native plant ground cover, although there's a little native plant garden at the Point Defiance Park, so you might want to go in there and just walk around and see what would look nice in your yard. Yeah,
good idea.
My daughter and I are going to experiment this year with planting wildflower beds, so to try to kind of shrink the size of our lawn. I wouldn't quite call it a ground cover, but that's a great way to attract pollinators.
Well, I did ground cover with clover and a couple of other natives from up here that I think are going to be nice. And the other is I've got quite a bit of moss, which you know, is not necessarily a water saver, but I do believe it keeps the ground in better condition than if it was bare.
I like the look of moss. I think depending where it is, it looks nice.
You raised a really good point, Mitch, too, about water use, because once you establish native plants, they often tend to be drought tolerant. So you kind of get off easier for needing to water and also just saving that water then.
Well, we made an effort last year to cut our water usage by about 20%, and I'm shooting for a total of 50 from the original level this year.
That's great. Gardening is a really good way to achieve that because so much of home water use goes to watering our lawns and gardens. So that's a great place to start.
Sarah, you mentioned that each of your kids had a raised bed of 4x4. What are some other, if people are either both new to gardening or they'd like to get their kids involved, what are some good ways to do that?
Yeah, I would suggest to give them a sunny plot. Because there's so many more options with sunny plots. So, and I think also something relatively small, like my kids are 8 and 10 and they each have a 4x4 plot. And that seems like just the right size. I think something too big, you get really excited in the spring and you plant it, but then it needs to be weeded.
Yeah.
So it kind of works with the size of their attention span. And then there's also enough space where you can plant several different crops in there. Like the ones that have been a really big hit with my kids are things that are kind of like finger food, like cherry tomatoes, sugar snap peas. Like they like to just kind of go around and graze. We've done things like growing kale, and that works well. But then, at least with my kids, sometimes they get territorial about actually harvesting it and everyone eating it. So for them, finger foods tended to work well. When they were a little bit younger, they really enjoyed growing kale and things like that to help provide the salad for dinner or something.
Yeah.
And I think that involvement in the family's daily effort to just sustain itself is important to kids. It's something that a couple of generations of Americans lost.
Yeah, I think it is important. I think it's fun, and I think it's important to know where your food comes from. And then if you're lucky, it might inspire a lifelong passionate gardener, and that's a good thing too. I don't have kids, but I know my problem with the garden is that we have a huge backyard, and I have all of these great ideas, and then I get busy doing other things, and I often do not get started, or I get started way too late. So for me, making a commitment to something small is a little bit easier, and that I like the straw bale gardening for that. But I also like being able to use some, just big pots for growing lettuces and things. So I would love to have a giant garden, but in fact, I have a giant yard to maintain and then small vegetable gardens.
Oh, and we also have a couple of nice pieces on smaller container gardens and the benefits of planting herb gardens, both for pests, prevent pests, and for reducing water usage. So check those out as well.
Yeah. We also had an article that I thought kind of fit with the idea of how do you inspire your kids or get your kids intrigued. And it's a Q&A with the author of No Waste Kitchen Gardening. And this is quite fascinating, I think, especially for little kids, to be able to take things like the green onions that you have the ends of, if you keep the ends of, or lettuces or things like that, and grow new plants out of them. The author is Katie Elzer Peters, and her book is No Waste Kitchen Gardening. And I thought, yeah, that actually sounds like a lot of fun. I think people would enjoy that.
It's a great idea. My daughter really enjoys collecting seeds in the fall, too, and then putting them in envelopes and labeling them and planting them in the spring.
Nice.
It's a great way to encourage self-sufficiency. One thing that I think works...
Sweet potatoes and things like pineapple tops in order to get sweet potatoes and pineapple tops. We've done onions, but never that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think works really well with kids is to let them take the lead as much as possible. And they will kind of stumble and make mistakes. But like last year, my daughter just really wanted to grow flowers. And I really wanted her to grow food crops, but I just kind of took a deep breath and let her do what she wanted. And she loved it. And she grew some medicinal plants and made some teas out of it. And it looked beautiful. So I think sometimes it's easy for parents to have, an idea of what things should look like. And then the kids have a really different idea. So letting them take the lead as much as possible, like within, appropriate guidelines, I think can be really helpful.
Sure. Help them avoid the mistakes, but let them make them too.
Right. I don't know that I'd let them plant highly invasive plants or, things that might create a long-term issue. But yeah, just letting them follow their curiosity.
Yeah, planting some kudzu would not be a good idea.
Yeah.
No. Or frankly, we've had our yard overrun at different times by me planting mint and planting red clover in areas that were not well contained. So it's easy to make those mistakes sometimes. Well, let's turn to our Earthling questions this week. I've got a couple of them.
They're always a challenge, and this is another week with some interesting questions.
There are some really good ones, and some of them sort of touch on the garden world anyway, especially the first one. Lori in Louisville, Kentucky asks, where can I dispose of old mulch?
Well, mulch is something that if you keep it dry, is going to be useful for a long time. It doesn't really expire per se. But if it gets damp and is sealed, you'll tend to get mold growth, and that can be a problem. It can, if you use the damp mulch that is moldy, you can infect plants, you can introduce the mechanisms of infection for a lot of different things into your lawn. But there is a solution. You can spread it out in an area that is not part of your garden, dry it out, and unless you really do see thorough mold spores in the material, go ahead and use it after it's completely dry. So it isn't necessary to throw out or dispose of old mulch, but if it is something that you want to get rid of, you should take it to an industrial composting facility. That's often co-located with a municipal transfer station in your area. So that is the simple answer. In Louisville, Kentucky, you can take it to the local municipal transfer station, and they can take care of it. But we urge you to think about trying to use it without that.
If it's moldy, if something's moldy, could you still add it to your compost pile, or would that not be a good idea?
Well, the compost pile is going to, if you continue to stir it, should kill those kinds of spores and antigens in such a way that you would be okay in the long run. If your mulch smells sour or like sulfur, like old eggs, that's a sign that it is in a bad condition, and that's what you would want to spread out and dry before using, or you would want to send it somewhere.
Yeah. All right.
And I think if your home mulch or your home compost pile may not get hot enough to deal with it.
Yeah, that makes sense to really break it down. Well, Dory in Glenview, Illinois asks, how do I recycle an old tube TV? Well, an old tube TV, cathode ray tubes, remember them well. They are the televisions that we all, many of us grew up with, that have a large magnet at the back that's involved in projecting the electrons onto the screen. And that magnet and the glass that contains it often is shot through with lead. So these are not something that you want to just throw out because you can create lead poisoning problems. We recommend you take these to a hazardous waste facility, household hazardous waste facility at your municipal transfer station, or to a specialized electronics recycler. And in those cases, these are not easy materials to recycle and separate from one another, but they are disposed of in such a way that they are safe for the environment, and that's the right way to handle them. That sounds like good advice. I was thinking, would this be one of those things where I would say, find out if any of the local artists are interested in it. But that tends to be true for some of the parts. But if you have all of the old internal tube-based equipment, I'm not sure that people are as interested in taking that on.
There are still plenty of organizations and companies out there that can make even a profit on that.
Oh, good.
So they will take it.
All right. Well, finally, and this one I think is kind of a hard one. Marshall on Facebook asks, how do I dispose of Roundup herbicide?
Well, let's put Roundup in the bigger category of all the pesticides and herbicides that you might use in your yard, which we would certainly encourage you to stop doing. We know that Roundup, for instance, is associated with human cancers as well as animal cancers. But disposing of this stuff is not easy. A lot of people's idea of disposing of Roundup is to pour it down the drain, which is terrible for groundwater and the safety and health of everything downstream from you, which includes the ocean. So what you need to do with this is take it to a local facility, a hazardous waste facility, and ask them to take the liquid and deal with it responsibly. It can be recycled into its component chemicals, but then what are we going to do with those? It's probably better to just get rid of this stuff at this point. And then the other problem is the container. And a lot of folks may have some old Roundup squirt bottles around that they think they could refill and maybe use for other purposes, such as spraying plants. That is something that is not allowed. It should not be reused. The Environmental Protection Agency has rules against reusing this in any kind of food-related environment. So don't make that mistake at home. What you have to do with the bottle is take it into the same kind of hazardous waste facility where it will be triple washed, and then it will be recycled as plastic normally would be. But it is so toxic that it has to be washed out thoroughly before you can begin to use the plastic again. So don't dump it down the stream, down the drain, because it'll end up in the stream or in a groundwater source or elsewhere and do harm to you and other people. And make sure that the containers are handled the right way as plastic, but as hazardous material contained in plastic.
Yeah. Well, I guess more good reasons to be leery of purchasing anything like that. Not only is using it quite human and environment dangerous, but getting rid of it later is really quite a problem.
Well, and we talked a couple of shows back about the idea of solarization of your soil, which accomplishes essentially the same thing. You lay down plastic and or a heavy mulch early in the spring. Let that warm the soil for 3 or 4 weeks, and then pull the plastic up or mix the mulch into the ground, and that should eliminate a lot of the same herbs and invasive plants that you were trying to get rid of with Roundup. So it is not necessary to begin with the idea that you're going to kill everything in your lawn. You can do that naturally, simply with heat and a little bit of shade.
Yeah, a little bit of planning too. Yeah. Okay. Well, any other gardening advice you have to impart before we wrap up? Sarah, anything from you in Maine?
I guess getting back to the solarizing, I had said a couple of weeks ago about putting a tarp down, but on second thought, it's really good for solarizing soils to have it be a clear plastic, like Mitch was saying, so the sun can pass through and heat things up. So that's something I'm going to try more in the summer, because we haven't had a whole lot of sunshine around here just yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I've got some parking strip areas that we're trying to figure out how to maintain them in a little bit of a less chemical way, and haven't come up with a great solution yet. So the plastic might be an option to try to kill the weeds there.
Well, my gardening advice is try something new this year, whether it's a different kind of plant or a different vegetable. That's what I'll be doing. I'm settling in on a new set of tomatoes that I'm going to try to grow.
Oh, exciting. All right. Well, I don't have any great advice this year. I'm well behind on all of the wonderful dreams and plans I had, but I will certainly be trying to raise some tomatoes at least, because they're so good.
The human condition.
The human condition. The regular human condition. So that's what we have for this episode. Now, if you do have any gardening questions or suggestions and you want to send us an email, you can do that at feedback@earth911.com. And stay tuned on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and of course at our Earth 911 website. We will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.